So we've done a lot in the last 2 years, and I wanted to share some of the highlights before we get to the budgeting part of the conversation tonight. So if you want to go and give me the first one, thank you. So I was going to focus first on our growth in our extracurriculars and athletics. We have just seen a boom in participation in both these areas. We have increased in soccer, basketball, volleyball, cross country. We now have a girls on the run team, baseball and softball. This year, for example, alone, our 5th through 8th grade basketball participation, we literally have half of our students that are in 5th through 8th grade participating in basketball this year. So that was pretty cool. It did create a little bit of some challenges that I know that my assistant principal, Sean, can attest to, whereas scheduling games, because we had to have so many teams, which was new this year. So that was pretty exciting, though, to see that rise in participation in athletics. With our newer PE teacher, she started Girls on the Run this year as well, because we have a lot of girls who want to do running. So because they expressed interest, she stepped up and said she'd coach a team. Our LEAPS enrollment has gone up significantly as well. Just for this trimester alone, we had 125 students registered in our LEAPS program, which is our after school and summer programming. So we have almost half of our students participating in our after school programming as well. This year in 4th grade band, we have 75% of our 4th graders participating in intro band. Last year was 57%, so we have blown that up as well. Band in 5th through 8th grade, we have approximately, so if I can remember this number, do you remember the number? It's like 40 some students this year. We went up a few, we've always had a very strong band program here, but they've increased that as well. And that's coming up, it's going to be bigger and bigger, because with so many 4th graders this year, when they get to be in the 5th through 8th grade band, that will also increase. We started an esports program here. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's electronic sports. So it's essentially certain video games that can be competitive across the state and nation. Middle school has just been added to the Vermont's esports programming, so we are participating in that, and we have a huge group of students after school participating in that. I walked in the room and saw lots of different competitions going on between the different groups of students. So that was really fun. We had some really cool shots of our basketball waiting and some band students. As far as academics, we've also grown in that area as well. We have some new and updated curricula that we're using in the building. For ELA, English Language Arts, we have MyView and Amplify. This has been a boon. Our staff has commented on seeing the growth with the students just because it is very rigorous. For example, in 2nd grade, one of their words recently was relief for a 2nd grader, knowing those rules for EI, IE, and how to spell words such as relief as a 2nd grader is pretty impressive. Desmos and Bridges are our math curriculums. There was an update to those, and it's been more streamlined. The kids are even more engaged than they were before. We have a new SEL curriculum called Wayfinder. The kids are loving that. There's activities for them daily, and our guidance counselors are really supporting that as well with the core lessons that the classroom teachers then are implementing the supplementary activities. And this year we have STEM as a separate unified arts class as opposed to just being integrated in classrooms. And I have a short video to show about some of the STEM our 1st graders have made comments on. The 1st graders, every grade is taking STEM this year as part of their rotation. And they've done things like problem solving, looking at the real world and saying, where could I find a problem, make a hypothesis, test it out, reassess, did it work or not, create a model, etc. So they've been using things like everyday found objects, 3D printing. As you can see, we have a 3D printing suite over there, doing some building, using things just like paper cups and stuff to solve solutions. They're extremely engaged. And our 1st graders, I have a short video that you'll see, are going to comment on what their thoughts about our STEM curriculum has been so far this year. But we have a whole plan for each of the grades. Our 8th graders, on Friday at our Winterfest, got to test out their cardboard sleds they made. So I unfortunately missed that part of Winterfest, so I don't know if it was successful with the sleds or not, Sean?
Mixed reviews. Some
Mixed
were
reviews.
successful, some had some challenges.
So, but that was all part of their design process. They had to design the perfect sleds and then test them out. And so the 8th graders got to do that. They'll also be competing in the, I forget what it's called now, it's like a real world problem challenge with some STEM thinking. So they're excited to do that this spring. We do an assessment called the STAR. We do it 3 times a year. And from fall to winter, we saw huge growth in our reading and math abilities. We went from about 42% up to 49%. So we made 6 to 7% growth in just 3 months, which is huge. When you look at our population, we have a lot of students. They've had opportunities new opportunities to focus on learning, but making it fun. One of the things they had to do with the 3D printers, there was a contest. We gave academic awards and they got to design tokens, and then the kids got to vote on which tokens they thought were the best that they could earn for being successful for growth or for proficiency in math and or reading. And so they made some tokens. I'm wearing them right now. So the 3 that they won had 3 designs. They're hard to see, but so they designed them and then we 3D printed them, and the kids each got them if they made their growth or they made their proficiency. So out of our entire population, only about 30 just missed the mark. So we're guessing by spring we'll have hit 100%. So that's pretty cool. We still have our annual field trip opportunities. Our 4th graders go to the State House. Hopefully starting next year, our 5th graders are going to get to do Starbase down in Burlington, which is like a rocket kind of thing. I've been told. I haven't seen it yet because we haven't done it yet. Our 2nd graders read a book and got to see a movie based on the book. And then our 5th through 8th graders still have their winter rec days. So they get to go to Jay Peak or go ice skating or bowling as it may occur. And our WIN time, which stands for What I Need, has actually become more productive and successful as we go throughout the year. We're really honing that in on providing enrichment opportunities for students as well as reteaching moments for students with what they need specifically. And that's an all hands on deck program. We have our UA teachers even helping out with some small groups of students to really try to target what the kids need the best. And I would love to show you what the kids think about the academics in this short video.
Hi, my name is Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan.
Hi, Megan. What do you love about STEM?
I love that it's like something that we get to learn about, and engineering and science and math and all of what the STEM stands for, and it's just fun to like play with stuff and make stuff.
Okay, thanks. What is something you're proud of that you've done in STEM?
I'm proud of making the balloons.
Great. What do engineers do and why is it important?
Engineers, like, they build stuff and they engineer in their brain. They think of stuff, what they can make, and they build with, like, anything.
Okay, why is that important?
Because you need to learn, you need to be hardworking and think and learn about stuff when you grow up and be all of it.
Okay, thank you. 1.
Hi, my name is Glenn. Hi, my name is Liam. Hi, my name is Eden.
All right. Gwen, what do you love about STEM?
I love about STEM when we do gears, because gears are fun.
Okay, Liam, what do you love about STEM?
Everything.
Everything?
Yes.
Even the hard work? Okay, Eden?
I love robots.
You love robots. What do engineers do, Eden?
They solve problems. They figure stuff out. And they build things.
Okay. Why is that important for us to learn, Liam?
So we can get smarter.
Okay. Can we do anything else with our STEM skills, Gwen?
Be kind.
Okay. What about if we fail at something? Why is STEM important if we fail at something?
It's okay because you can finish it next time.
Okay.
It's okay because you can do it again.
Okay.
It's okay because you can learn from your mistakes and you can try again.
I love it. All right. Thank you, first graders.
Bye. Hi, my name is Bryce. Hi, my name is Molly.
All right. Hello, fifth grade representatives. What do you love about STEM?
I like the engineering. I like just all the projects that we get to do.
Okay. What is something that you've done in STEM that you're proud of?
Definitely Rube Goldberg machines.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I like how they just make it confusing just to do just one simple thing. So you really have to work and be able to actually imagine something that can work.
Did it take you a lot of time?
Yes.
Did it stress you out a little bit?
A little.
But did you come out with a win
Uh-huh.
in the end? All right, Molly?
So making our 3D printing our problem and solution one because it was hard to think of something to do like by yourself.
But you came out with a successful model?
Yeah.
Excellent. What is the engineering design process?
First, you need to think of what you're going to do. Then you need to plan it out. And then you need to start creating. If it doesn't work out the way you do it, then you fix it.
Okay. Why is that important?
It's important because you need to make sure that you can keep improving because if the first one doesn't work, then you want to be able to do it.
So that's some of the things that we've been integrating into the school this year. And that engineering design process doesn't just apply to engineering, as we all know. It's pretty much how we have to approach any sort of problems. So assess, try, if it doesn't work, what can we do better? Recreate, retry, and again. So. And then I also wanted to point out some of our celebrations that we do try to do here to encourage our students and our staff. We have some staff versus student games we do. Soccer in the fall, football in the fall. We tied or won this year.
We won soccer.
Yep. And we tied football.
Football, maybe one football.
Yeah, we won. We're adult. Yeah, staff won. We just had our basketball game on Friday, and I was just informed we lost.
Just for the 7th and 8th grade boys.
Okay. We did volleyball last year, and we had a great volleyball team last year, and they creamed the adults. It was kind of sad. And we're looking at potentially some sort of baseball, t-ball, softball, something or other this spring, maybe. We'll see. Safety concerns. We also are one of the top schools in the state for PBIS, which stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Supports and Systems. Last year, when they did the survey results for us, we had like 80-something percent, 85%, and we're now at 97% on all of our assessments for our implementation of PBIS. So we were noted on the Vermont PBIS site last spring, and I was told we'll be again this year just for our successful implementation of the program. It's really a great program and encouraging our students to respond differently to behavior redirection. We use positive behavior to redirect anything that isn't the anticipated expectations. We have weekly Golden Bear Paws. We acknowledge staff and students who showed something awesome the previous week. We do school-wide celebrations when the whole school has accumulated enough positive awards. We'll do stuff like obstacle courses, music during lunch, something like that. We have our BEARS award assemblies. BEARS is our acronym. It stands for, I knew I was going to be put on the spot in the minute I was. I heard it. So, because I do them out of order. Okay, so B is the one I always screw up because it's belonging, you're right. I was going to say be kind, but I know that's act kindly. So belonging, engaged, act kindly, responsible, okay, and safe, being safe. I'm sorry, get put on the spot. So we do We have 6 of those actually a year. I know there's 5 letters. We're going to have an all-around at the end of the year this year, kind of like gymnastics where you have your all-around award. So we have 6 of those assemblies each year, along with book buddies, which comes right after the assembly. The kids get paired up with different rooms. So like a 5th grade room might be paired up with a 1st grade room, and they read together with partners right after our assemblies. We do our academic awards twice a year, so we just did our first one for winter to really encourage our students to value their education and their academic prowess. And then, as always, every year we have our 8th grade celebration ceremony at the end of the school year. Just to, as they are matriculating to other schools, we want to have one last hurrah with them as well. And that's my school spotlight, so I can turn it over to Superintendent Coda and Morgan Daybell, who can answer questions about our upcoming budget season.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Is that right? Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh boy. Okay. Would you like the floor first, Michelle?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Morgan. Happy birthday to you.
I got my birthday wish spending it all with you.
Morgan loves us so much, he asked if we could do a budget presentation on his birthday this year. So of course we obliged. So I'm going to kick this off. My name is Lynn Coda. I'm the superintendent for Franklin Northeast. For those of you who don't know me, this is my 30th year working in Franklin Northeast. I began right out of college. I have been a teacher here, an instructional coach, an assistant principal, a principal, and a superintendent. I attended Franklin Northeast schools. All 4 of my children graduated from Franklin Northeast schools, and I'm in that like greatest phase of your life. I have grandchildren now, and my oldest granddaughter is now a student in a preschool in Franklin Northeast. So what happens here means a lot to me professionally, but also personally. So this work is really important to me. Do you want to?
And I'm Morgan Daybell. I'm the CFO for Franklin Northeast. I've been in this role for about a dozen years now, and then I was on the school board in Montgomery for about 10 years prior to that.
We have a lot of things to celebrate in Franklin Northeast this year. We have 4 athletic teams that won state championships between Richford High School and Enosburg. We have some students on this NMV side, this Northern Mountain Valley side. Jessie Allen, who has been the past president of the Vermont Future Farmers of America, and she's now the current reporter. We have Carter Blaney, who is a 2-time gold medalist in Skills USA. Marshall Moffett, who is a recent graduate from Richford High School, who was just honored one of 2 young Vermont people to receive an award called the John Lewis Youth Leadership Award for his commitment to social justice, equity, and inclusion. And to Michaela Shagnon, who was a Berkshire student, is now a Richford High School senior who has won the Presidential Scholar. Here also on the NMV side, here at Sheldon Elementary, Chris Comstock was our Sheldon music teacher, was named the UVM FNESU's representative to the UVM Outstanding Teacher of the Year for elementary teacher. And then Michelle Plouffe, who works at Bakersfield Elementary, was recognized for our Above and Beyond Award in FNESU. So there's a celebration page in the annual report. If anybody does anybody back there want an annual report? You can pass them around. Okay. So I thought I would give you a little highlight from there. So there's data that I'd like to share with you. As Terry Sue mentioned in her presentation, we've made some shifts, instructional shifts in the last couple of years, and we have been able to purchase updated curriculum. We had curriculum resources are quite expensive, and it isn't something that we've been able to regularly build into our budget. But through what was called the ESSER grant money that came after COVID, we were able to make some really solid investments in curriculum resources and tools. So we're seeing improvement in our academic outcomes with our students with the elevated rigor of our tools. So this is a quick look. I know you can't read the numbers. It's very similar data to what's posted in your annual reports. So what we look for is growth over time. So this is really looking at literacy, and the two lines, there's a fall line and a winter line, and at the end of the year we'll be able to look at a spring line. So what we want to see is that more students move up into that proficient level. Green represents the number of students who are at or above proficiency. That lighter yellow color represents students that are almost there, they're really close. The gold, those are students that need intervention, and the red are students that need urgent intervention. So we want to start seeing fewer and fewer of the other colors and more of the green. With the exception of first grade, and I'll explain why, we're seeing some pretty solid growth from fall into winter on our STAR literacy data. In first grade, we recognize that we have to have an assessment plan at the system level. So when first graders enter, they don't take the literacy assessment. In the fall, they take the early literacy assessment because they're generally pre-readers when they enter first grade. So those students in the winter have progressed so much, they're now taking the more rigorous tests. So it looks like they didn't make growth, but they actually really did, because most of those students are taking a much harder assessment now. So we look forward to seeing what the spring data looks like there. This is our math data. We have been investing a lot of resources into our math curriculum and instructional coaching and working with teachers to improve math instruction over many years. We are in our third year of having a common curriculum in our middle school, and we have common curriculums. We've had common curriculum in our K through 5 for quite some time. So we're seeing pretty steady growth across each grade level. Again, it's the same as the other one, these two lines, first grade all the way through 12th grade. So we're seeing some good growth there. Not everywhere, but in most places we're seeing good growth. And what this data tells us is, it tells us about our programs and it tells us about our resources, but more importantly, it tells us about our students. So this is data that isn't done just for data's sake, it's data that's done, and then teacher teams in schools use that data to be able to identify, okay, Mr. Stebbins is a 6th grade math student, and these are the specific skills he's mastered, these are the specific skills he has not, and it helps inform us to be able to know exactly what he needs additional time and support with. I had someone tell me last year, I think it was during this budget season, that they didn't know what Northern Mountain Valley was. So I thought I would add this in this year. We have kind of a confusing education governance structure in Vermont. So we have a supervisory union, that's Franklin Northeast, and we have what's called a side-by-side governance structure. And what that means is we have these 4 schools, Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery, and Sheldon. We operate pre-kindergarten through 8th grade, and we tuition 9th through 12th grade students. In FNESU, we also have another district, the Enosburg-Richford district, and they operate schools pre-K through 12. So because our structures didn't match, we didn't fully merge under Act 46. That's why we have 2 separate districts. So we're presenting to you information tonight about just the NMV district, so just these 4 schools. So for all of you that live here in our NMV towns, including Morgan and myself, we operate 4 schools, pre-K through 8, and we educate 828 students in this district.
We start the budget process each year by looking at the number of kids we have in the building and the number of kids we expect. I'm going to go to the next one. We do that by counting kids on October 1st who actually are enrolled in our schools for the previous 5 years, and then we extrapolate that out for the next 5 years to try to get a handle on where the trend lines are going. You'll see for Sheldon, certainly we're expecting an increase over the next couple of years. Same for Bakersfield and Montgomery now, relatively level growth in Berkshire. But the important takeaway here is that the narrative in Franklin Northeast and really in Chittenden and Franklin County generally is much different than the narrative of the rest of the state, specifically southeastern Vermont, really seeing a pretty rapid decline in the number of kids that they're educating. And I will say, I'll be going through a lot of this quickly. Some of this is in your annual report. You can get more detailed information, both linked through from the Sheldon Elementary School Facebook page or through our website, fnesu.org. And we have a lot more of the backup to everything we're going on here up on the website. It's not that interesting to talk about in a public meeting, but if you really want to get into the details, you can download that. At the annual meeting, all articles are going to be voted by ballot. That's how we have been doing it for the last few years. And then this past year, we moved the moderator and the clerk elections to ballot as well. The clerk currently is Emily Fecteau, who's the Berkshire Town Clerk. She has filed to run again. The moderator position is currently empty, and no one has filed to run. In any of the cases where there's a ballot vote, you can choose to write someone in. Because we do everything now by Australian ballot, the moderator is really a holdover from statute in the past. There are also 3 school board seats up for election. One has to be a resident of Bakersfield and 2 have to be residents of Montgomery, but everyone in every town gets to vote for all those 3. So Sheldon residents can vote for any of these positions. In Bakersfield, Audrey Shea is a new candidate and is running for an open seat. In Montgomery, there was a mid-year replacement for somebody who stepped off. Michelle Schapp is running to stay in that seat. And then for the full 3-year term in Montgomery, Mary Niles, who's the current board chair, is running for re-election for her seat. The next article on the town meeting ballot is the major one where the school board is asking for permission to spend about $24 million for the ensuing school year. We'll go into the details of that in a little bit. There's a second sentence that has returned to the ballot. It was gone for about 5 years, and the legislature has required districts to put it back up. And what it does is it breaks this spending down into a per pupil spending amount. So we'll be talking about this 11,718 figure later, and then the percentage change from the prior year. So I want you to kind of hold on to both the 11,718, which we'll see is dramatically lower than most of the state, and this 10.6%, which feels high, and there's a reason for that, which we will go into later. There's also an article to put half of the money that was left over from the 2024 school year into a capital reserve fund. This is something that has been on the ballot most years since NMV has existed, and most of the towns had done something similar to that. What this does is this puts money into a fund that we can then use to deal with building repairs as they come up. So we know that in Berkshire this summer we're planning on replacing their boilers there, oil boilers, replacing them with wood pellet boilers. About half of that is likely to be paid for by grants, but there's still going to be a pretty big price tag that needs to cover that. We also know that once that project is done, we've got old boilers here in this building in Sheldon. They're still on steam, which is hard to find people to fix. That was kind of the next big capital project on the horizon for the NMV side. The other 51,000 and change as we'll talk about later, will go into basically bringing down the tax rate for this year.
Okay, so when we look at last year's budget and we look at this year's budget, we took the total amount and we have unpacked what has driven the increase from last year to this year. So because we're a tuitioning town, we only operate through grade 8, we have to pay tuition for all those 9th through 12th grade students. We don't get a vote or a say in what that tuition rate is. And this year, this is having a pretty significant impact on our budget. So overall, secondary tuition is up $928,898 from last year to this year. And that's a combination of two things. One is increase in the cost of tuitioning. But the second thing is we have a really large 8th grade class and we're graduating a very small senior class. So what we budgeted last year compared to the additional students we're having to build in for this year, we have 67 seniors graduating, but we're replacing that with 82 8th graders. So that is pretty significant. We are also in negotiations with both our support staff and our teachers union. We are negotiating for next year and beyond. And we also settled with our support staff for this year after this budget was already approved. So we've had to build in increased salary for both this year and for last year. So in our expected increases, what we're predicting, you never know where you're gonna land in negotiations. We're expecting that to be nearly $600,000, $594,000 and some change. We have in this budget, and you'll see it in another slide, this budget includes almost five fewer staff members than it did the previous year. We've been contending with, let me start by saying, healthcare is no longer bargained at the local level. Healthcare is bargained at the state level. And for the last 3 years, we've seen double-digit increases in healthcare. This year it was 12.6%. And for us in this district, that was over $250,000. So pretty significant impact in the year-over-year spending. There are also some additional increases for other health benefits like dental, life, and long-term disability. We also have in this district 2 schools who have tested positive for PCBs. I'm guessing many of you have heard about that in the news. That's something that we are required by the legislature to test in all of our schools. Our school that had the most significant impact was Berkshire. So Berkshire has 2 classrooms and they're upstairs that we have not been able to use for 2 full school years because they have elevated levels of PCBs. So when the legislators passed that law, there was money attached to the mitigation and remediation of PCBs. That money is gone now, and we don't know if there's more money coming behind it, but we know that we've tested positive and now we have to mitigate that. So we're hoping we'll go through the mitigation process. The money that we have in our capital reserve we're really thankful for. We're hoping that if they pass something in the legislature, we're on a list that hopefully we would still be eligible for reimbursement for that work. Sheldon also tested positive for PCBs, not to minimize that test, but their levels were not the elevated levels were not in instructional spaces, so it's essentially the shell around the gym. So the boiler room and locker rooms, and I believe that we had slight elevation in the gym and kitchen, but those are not spaces where kids spend enough time where we had to close those spaces down. And those levels were not as elevated as Berkshire. Still means we're going to have to fix those within the next few years, but again, we don't know where the funding for that is going to come from.
And this slide shows the same increases just in a pie chart. So tuition makes up half of the increase that we have in this budget. Teacher and staff salaries, as you mentioned, is about 1/3 of it. And then health insurance premiums in orange, a little less than 1/4. And then the other is the everything else. So that's the increase in utilities, increase in supplies that we're giving kids, increase in the supervisor union assessment, which covers transportation, it covers special education, covers food service. So those more discretionary areas are relatively small. Tuition, health insurance, we really have no control over. Salaries we do through that negotiation process and who we hire, but it's not as direct as it is in terms of setting your supply list or how much you're going to spend on athletics the next year.
So this is the impact in the staffing changes that we've made across these 4 schools for the next year. So overall, we've reduced 4.4 staff members. So that decrease, we had 5 paraeducator positions that we were able to reduce, 2 in Bakersfield, 1 each in Berkshire, Montgomery, and Sheldon. And here in these NMV schools, well, here in Sheldon in particular, last year the population grew so much in Sheldon, we really needed 1 additional elective teacher in order to be able to meet our obligation around teacher preparation time. So we hired a STEAM teacher, Julie Cattell, she was the voice in the video that you heard earlier, and she's been doing some amazing things with students. The NMV board members were really pleased with what they're hearing about the STEAM program that's happening in Sheldon, and they want it for the other schools as well. So they're doing some work in the budget to create space for a STEAM teacher that will be shared, so they'll spend 1/3 of their time in each of our other 3 schools. So you see the addition of a STEAM teacher with a reduction of a health teacher in Bakersfield. We've been able to fill that role with someone already on staff, so we've removed that from the budget, and we have increased an art teacher position in Berkshire by 3 days. One thing I want to say is that we're going to talk a little bit about the governor's transformation plan at the end of this presentation, and one of the things I want to say is it's for a couple of years now, we've known that our education system is very expensive across the state. We've known that there are problems with how we pay for education in the state and how we budget for education in the state through governance, through school size, all kinds of things. So there's a lot happening at the state level around that. We've known for a couple of years that they're really looking at class size and your ratios of teachers and students and administrators to kids. So Terry Sue knows this from the work that we've been doing. Morgan and I have been doing quite a lot of professional learning, both at the state level and beyond, around how to staff. They're calling it staffing with precision. So knowing if you have this many art classes that you're offering each week, this many students in each of those classes, do you really need a full-time art teacher, or could you have a 4-day-a-week art teacher? So we've really been trying to do that. We've been trying to look at paraeducator staffing as well, and trying to identify which students have paraeducator support that is necessary, and in which, as there's turnover with paraeducators, we don't automatically refill those. We take a look and do an audit to see what's the need for the paraeducator. So we're trying to make some of these precision staffing decisions through attrition without having to let people go. So that's what you see in some of this budget work that we have done.
Now we'll talk about how we go from the proposed budget to the tax rate that you'll see on your bills this summer. I'll say again, we'll go over it relatively briefly here. Each of these steps is laid out in pretty excruciating detail on our website. So if you're interested with that level of exactitude, please go there and look at those documents. What we do is we'd start with a budget that we hope that you approve next week. From that, we take out whatever revenue we anticipate coming in. That's mostly categorical grants from the state. We get a certain amount of money to educate English language learners, for example, and we know that that money's coming in. We also take out whatever money we have in the checking account as of the end of 2024. So this is the other half of the money that we're asking you to put aside in the capital reserve fund. If that article is voted down, this number then goes up and the tax rate will go down a little bit. So if we start with the money that the voters approve, we subtract out the money that we know we have, we come up with what's called education spending. And this is basically the bill that we send to the state and say, our budget is passed, this is how much money we need from you to run our schools for the year. We then divide that figure by the number of kids we have in the district. And this number, we don't actually have 2,061 kids. That's a weighted average, so we'll start with actual kids who are in our schools. We get to count high school kids a little bit more than elementary school kids. We get to count kids who are living in poverty more than those who are not. Up here, we get a little bit of a benefit for being in such a sparsely populated area. And then we get to count kids a little bit more in some of our smaller schools, because the state knows that small schools are more expensive to run than larger schools. So the amount of money we need from the state divided by the number of kids gets us to a per pupil spending amount. And that's that 11,718 that will appear on the warning, and we'll talk about that again a little bit later in the process. That number divided by what's called the yield rate gets us a district level tax rate of $1.37. The yield is a number that's set by the legislature each year in May, probably in June this year, and that's a number that they come up with that basically will raise enough money in the state from property tax to send money out to all of the districts. So, kind of very big picture, the amount we spend divided by the number of kids divided by the yield gets you to the tax rate. The amount we spend is controlled by the board and the voters. The number of kids is determined by the Agency of Education, and we're just given that. And then the yield is set by the legislature. So of those three factors, we have input only in the first one.
Do you want to talk about this here or?
Sure. So you'll see that we saw a drop on paper of about 35 kids. That is not reflective of the number of kids we actually have in our schools. We have found, and a number of districts across the state have found, that because of the way poverty is being calculated now, a lot of places have seen a decline in the number of kids that they get to count. So same number of kids, but not as many are being considered in poverty. So it's something that everyone's kind of dealing with, but as this number goes down, your per pupil spending goes up, and that's what is in part the reason for that 10.8% figure that you're going to see on the ballot. We then have to take that district rate of $1.37 and apply it to each of the 4 towns. You're paying based on the assessed value that shows up on the grand list and on your property bill. And the state knows that each of those grand lists in the town are not the same. Some are older than others. Some towns have seen more growth in terms of what properties are actually going for, and their grand list hasn't caught up yet. And so they look at property sales over the last few years, and they look at the grand list, and they calculate what's called the common level of appraisal, which is basically a number to see how far off your grand list is from fair market value. And what that does is it takes a tax rate that's the same at the beginning for all 4 towns, and it makes it equal, or it makes it fair across those 4 towns. So if I change the order, I think in the next slide, you can see this chart will show all of our 4 towns and then property values as they show on the grand list for 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. In FY26, let's go to Sheldon, the state thinks that a property that is listed for $100,000 is actually worth $143,000. And so they want people in Sheldon to be taxed on that $143,000. In Bakersfield, that property is worth a little bit more. That's $145,000. Now either that means that Bakersfield's grand list is more accurate than Sheldon's, or property sales have been going faster in Bakersfield than they have in Sheldon the last couple of years. In Montgomery, our town, that $100,000 house, the fair market value is actually $156,000. And so when you compare those differences, even though you start with the same district tax rate, the state wants the property tax rate in Montgomery to be higher than it is in Sheldon to make up for that difference in the fair market value of the properties. This chart kind of shows where we've been over the last 6 years. So FY20 would be the first year that we operated as a unified district. And if you see out in the FY26 projection, the reason that these dots are in different places is that CLA. That property in Montgomery, that's $100,000, is worth more than the property in Sheldon, and the property in Bakersfield, the property in Berkshire. The reason that they've moved so much, you'll see that that Montgomery and Berkshire were at the bottom of our district last year, and now they're the two that are at the top. And that's because property sales in those two towns over that look-back period have been a lot hotter in those than they were in Sheldon and in Berkshire. Bakersfield, sorry. You'll see this, if you go to the next one, we'll go right to Sheldon. This will show on the right side what we anticipate people will pay in property tax in Sheldon based on the value of their home if they do not pay on their income. So a home here that's worth $150,000 this year in Sheldon, the tax bill would be $2136. Last year was $2126. So that person's going to see a $10 increase year over year. On the left side is that $150,000 home, but for folks who are paying based on their income. And I will say, not linked from here, but linked from our website, you can go to a calculator that the tax department has put out, and you can put in your exact income level and your exact property tax level, and it will give you something tailored specifically to you. But $150,000 home, if you're making $80,000, your tax rate, your tax bill is going to be $1,680 this year, so less than that $2,136. But it's compared to $1,624 last year, so a little bit bigger of an increase year over year.
Could you go back to Bakersfield? And we've got Tenny and Joy here. Are there
Sure.
other towns represented here besides Sheldon and Bakersfield? Okay.
So in Bakersfield, that $150,000 house, again, the properties have been fairly stable in Bakersfield, so they're seeing only a $2 increase. If they're paying based on income, again, because of the way that the state is calculating that, a little bit more of an increase for income sensitized payers, but still they're paying less than if they were paying on the full value of the home.
So we have shared this data for several years, and I think it's important data for us to understand throughout all of our communities. So here, this long list of lines, this visual represents each district in the state of Vermont, and it represents the lowest spending, and this is per weighted pupil. The lowest spending is somewhere around $8,000, and the highest is somewhere around $18,000 per weighted pupil. So in Northern Mountain Valley, we are down here, this blue line, you can see it, this is actually the bottom of that blown up. So we're down here in the, I think it's the 11th spot. So we're the 11th lowest spending district in Vermont. The four bottom districts do not operate schools. So we're really, if you think about operating districts, we're the 7th lowest in the state. Our partners, Enosburg, Richford, they are the 6th lowest in the state and 2nd lowest if you're thinking about operating. The red on this visual here represents our Franklin County partners, the other school districts in Franklin County. This first black line represents the Franklin County average of per pupil weighted spending, and the second black line represents the statewide average of per pupil weighted spending. So you can see that what we are generating for what we're spending in our schools per weighted pupil is relatively very low compared to other parts of the state. So because it's very low, one of the things that we do from my office is we think about what are the things that we can do to help support our schools. And we do that through the human resource of pushing support and time and energy into our schools, but also in, I don't know a better word than hustling for additional revenues. So we're really active in seeking competitive grants, and we pulled out some grant data to be able to highlight in this annual report. And for the sake of tonight's meeting, I'll talk about the NMV grant pieces that we're sharing. So we hired a facilities director, I think 3 years ago. Overall, he has generated over $1 million in grant revenue at this point. He had a LED light project that he did in one of his first years. That a grant award was almost $112,000. I don't have what that long-term savings is going to be, because there's also pretty significant energy savings over time from the LED light project. But that's something that we're working to get. So that was across the board in all of our schools except one. We were not able to get the award for that one. Many people in FNESU benefit from our after-school program and our summer program. And I think that there might be a belief that that's something that every school does. And it actually isn't. There are about half of the schools in Vermont offer a program like ours, and half of the schools do not. So we're very fortunate to be able to do that. And the way we're able to afford that is we have an after-school director. It's required in our grant. And she a very active and very effective grant writer. So our award for after-school programs for this next 5-year period was almost $579,000. And she wrote an additional grant because Bakersfield had a separate grant for their summer program that expired last summer. So I'll be honest, we were a little worried, how are we going to be able to fund Bakersfield's summer? So we were trying to make some financial decisions about that. She went out and looked for another competitive grant, and we found out right before we went to print on these books that we were awarded $232,000 of additional money over 4 years. So we'll be able to fund that program, and some of this goes into other programs as well. So we're really actively seeking out those opportunities. I will talk just for a moment about a project we did in the other district. In the Enosburg-Richford district, Richford Junior Senior High School had a wood chip boiler that was no longer the right fit because they had done a window project, and it was now too big. So it wasn't the right fit for them. They did a pellet boiler project there, and he was able to generate $600,000 in competitive grants to help pay for that pellet boiler project. And we just got the report from, I believe that came from Efficiency Vermont, and we are expected to save $66,000 a year in energy costs, and over the course of a 20-year period, $1.3 million in energy savings. So we're very pleased with that. On this side, in this district, we are about to embark on a boiler project in Berkshire. I've been an administrator for 19 years, and I started in Berkshire in 2006. And when I took the keys from the other principal, he said those boilers are on their last leg. That was 18 years ago. We've been limping along with these boilers since then. So Vern, with Heather's help, went out and just received a $200,000 grant to be able to go towards that boiler project. So we're moving forward with that. Some of the things here, you can see them in your book under FNESU Innovates. We received the federal grant money that many schools across the country received after COVID. That was called the COVID Recovery ESSER funding. And we used a lot of that money to give back to our kids and try to have highly engaging materials and spaces in our building. This library is a really good example. Last year at our annual meeting, I tried to move a table to set up for this meeting, and the legs fell, like they were going to fall off if I wasn't holding it. So tables that had been here a really long time, and that was really the case in most of our buildings, and they were very heavy, hard to move around. So through that grant, this library, by way of example, you're sitting in new chairs, you have these new tables, you've got some new stuff here, but if you look over in the corner, we have a maker space there with some really highly engaging materials that those kids on the video were talking about. They're learning how to do things that are beyond anything I ever learned how to do in school, and it's just amazing what they're able to do. So here are some examples that I hope you'll look at in your book about some of those other materials and opportunities we're able to get for our students.
And I think before we leave grants, certainly it's been an uncertain 6 months or so in education and everything. We spend a lot of time telling our staff as we're watching the news, don't panic, but pay attention. Some of the things that we're paying attention on the federal level, about probably 10% of our budget comes from the feds. Title II grants, we get about $250,000. That seems to be in the crosshairs with the new administration. Get about $1 million in Title I money, and they're projecting that that's going to be cut down. $750,000 in special ed money that's uncertain on whether that's going to survive, and then at least $1 million in food service money, which also seems to be likely to be trimmed. Those are not really competitive grants, but some of these competitive grants as well have their original source in federal money, specifically the after-school program, which is touching $750,000, and we don't know how long that will last.
I always forget to go there. Thanks for adding that.
Because it's depressing.
Yeah.
We also have an article this year on the annual meeting warning asking for permission to set up a tuition reserve fund. So there's no money that would be allocated to this yet, but we do need to get voter approval to have it. If you'll think back to the slide of what was making up the increase this year, about half or about $1 million was because of anticipated tuition. And so one of the things that we talked about was having a fund where when we have a good year, maybe we don't have as many tuition kids as we budgeted, or we know we've got a couple of years with small 8th, 7th, 6th grade classes moving up to the high school, we could actually budget and put some money into a tuition reserve fund, or ask you to move some of those leftover funds into a tuition reserve fund. And so that in the future, when we get to a year where we have a big 8th grade class coming in, a small 12th grade class coming out, we wouldn't have to put all of that increase into the annual budget. We could use some of that reserve money and pull it out in a year to kind of smooth the increase.
And that's really been a driver for this district for the last 2 years. We've had the same scenario of large classes going in, small classes graduating.
Yeah, and we, Sheldon wasn't part of Franklin Northeast back in 2018, but that was something that the little districts had started talking about on the old FNE side. It's a little bit easier to manage that now because we have more kids, more towns, more taxpayers to share that across. But as you can see this year, sometimes we get a year where it's a big hit to the budget.
So we'll conclude our presentation with just a few words about the governor's education reform proposal. So there are two visuals up here on the left side of the screen. This reflects what Vermont's education governance system looks like right now. So it's very difficult to see, at least from my angle, but each of these shapes represent a different either supervisory union or supervisory district in the state. So there are 52 separate SUs or SDs in Vermont. Franklin Northeast is right here. Remember, I talked to you about how we have 2 districts. So there are other places in Vermont that are in a similar position as us. There are 119 total districts across the state of Vermont. We are operating 287 schools and educating 83,733 publicly funded students. So the governor has made a pretty large proposal for transformation. And let me start by saying, I think that I will acknowledge that we do need transformation. We do need to shift some things in our education system. I think that people across Vermont sent a message to Montpelier that was received very clearly last year when they voted down 33 school budgets across the state. So in his proposal, he is making recommendations around governance. He's making recommendations around how we fund education. And they're not really talking about the school piece, but the number of schools are also factored in this as well. So in the governor's proposal, he proposes that we go from 52 to 5. So what this represents, you see Champlain Valley region, Northeast region, Winooski Valley, Southwest region, and Southeast region. What that map reflects are the Vermont Superintendents Association's regional maps, right? Like those are our regions. So we created those, they created before I became a superintendent decades ago. And the only thing that we use that for is to determine which regional superintendent meeting do I attend each month. So that's why the map is built the way it's built. We're not completely sure why that was the way they chose to structure the proposal, but that's what this reflects. So we would be positioned within the Champlain Valley region, and that would be schools from Richford to Shoreham, about 35,000 students in that district. These 4 other districts range from 10,000 to 14,000-ish students in each of those other 4 districts. So you would have 5 superintendents in the state, 5 central offices in the state, and you would have in each of these regions 1 school board. So the school board is a little different than it is right now. Right now, Emily's here from our school board, and Tenny was a longtime school board member from Bakersfield, and those school board members basically volunteer. The amount of money, I'm pretty sure if you factor it in over the course of a year, probably doesn't pay their gas to come to all the meetings that we have. So this is different. These are quasi-professional board members that would be elected. We're not exactly sure of all the details because it's still lacking some of those details right now. I'm going to have Morgan talk a little bit about timeline.
And these last 2 slides may change tomorrow because we found out that the governor's team is presenting the actual legislation that they want passed to House Education Committee tomorrow. So again, don't panic, but pay attention. As it was initially laid out, this year would be the year that they really spend working on the legislation that they need for the new districts. In FY26, which is the year that we're voting on in terms of budgets right now, the governor has said that he would find some money to buy down tax rates for that transition year, hold everyone to an average level property tax rate. And then the Agency of Education would spend that year writing the rules by which they're going to judge us in these out years. In FY27, these new 5 districts would elect school board members. They would probably hire their first superintendent and start to develop that first budget. The old districts would start to close down shop. And we would have no budget votes this year. They haven't really told us what we would get for money, but it would be somehow tied to what we have in FY26. So maybe we get a percentage more. I may know what that is going to look like tomorrow. In 28, the new districts take over. There are school advisory councils set up, which are basically, they're sort of like parent-teacher organizations for each individual school, and they would have some input on a section of the budget development process, but mostly they would be responsible for helping the principal and the leaders develop a school improvement plan. And that's all I know about school improvement plans, so if you want to flesh that out.
So each school in Vermont, we don't know if this will be a recommendation because it's a federal recommendation. It's for all of our consolidated federal grant money we receive. Each school and our supervisory union, we have to write a continuous improvement plan. So really the only authority that school advisory team would have would be to approve that continuous improvement plan for each school and then make recommendations to that elected board about what some of the local priorities preferences would be.
And then the other big change in FY28 is changing how we fund schools. So right now, the board sets a budget, you all hopefully approve it, and that drives the money that we get from the state. In 2028, the state would say, here's the money you get, and you develop a budget using that. They're working a mechanism where you could go to the voters and ask to spend more in certain cases, but we haven't seen what the limits are gonna be on that yet. So it would be similar to what most of the other states in the country do in terms of the big picture. In terms of the details, we don't know yet, and the outcomes in those states are very radically different. And then 2029 and out, the code word is rescale school portfolio, which is looking at school sizes and those rules that they're gonna be writing next year and deciding at what point you can't continue to operate a school.
You could go back a slide, Courtney. So I think that one of the things that we are hearing is that they're not intending in the governor's proposal to close schools. But the reality is there are the education quality standards, and we now have new district quality standards that go live on July 1, 2025. What will happen, most likely, is that they will create the conditions so that new board will not be able to meet those standards, and they will not be able to operate all of the schools in their portfolio. They won't be able to staff them at an adequate level. So it will require, we're already seeing it, there's a lot of work happening around class sizes, which Terry Sue will attest, we're having those conversations about, we can't have a class of 10. We've got to be looking at, you have limited options when you're in a school that has one of each grade, which 4 of your buildings do. Terry Sue has 2 of each grade, so a little bit more flexibility there. But what they're essentially talking about is having schools that are large enough where you have an economy of scale so that you can respond when you have super small classes. You might have 4 teachers in a year, and the next year you may only need 3 of that grade level. And they're also trying to prevent some of the very small schools in Vermont. You know, I know it feels like we have really small schools and we're a tiny district. We're really not. We're in Vermont, and if you look at this map, we're the 13th largest district supervisory union in the state. And I did a little research last year. There are 100 schools during the last school year that had fewer students than our smallest school, which at the time was Bakersfield. So there are a lot of other schools that are much smaller than ours. Many schools that are under 100, I think under 50, and I think we had probably last year, I think there were 4 schools that had under 25 students. So the other thing to think about, as uncomfortable as this likely makes some of you feel, is that they're also making a point about there comes a time where not only can you not be efficient when your school is too small, you also cannot offer enough of the opportunities that students have in other schools that are more well-resourced when they're at scale. So these are all things that are in front of us, and I think Morgan's advice about don't panic but pay attention is important. The governor's proposal is not a done deal. This has to go through the whole legislative process. This will take a variety of shapes before it gets to the final point. I think it's highly unlikely we'll end with 5. I think that they're getting quite a lot of feedback about this 35,000 student district, that being, you know, about 3 times as large as some of these other districts. So I think that there are a lot of different ideas out there. There's county ideas, there's looking at tech center district ideas. There are a lot of things that are floating out there. So I think this is a time, you know, in education that's very important, because I think there's common agreement that something needs to change. The difficult part will be when we have to get to the place where decisions will need to get made, because then the emotion is going to come in to all of this. So I think it is important that we pay attention and know we're actively paying attention in this process, and we're both working from Morgan is an officer in the School Business Officials, VASBO. I'm an officer in the Superintendent's Association, so we're paying attention to this not only here, but at the state level too on your behalf. So we welcome any questions you have about any part of our proposal.
And you can vote
Oh,
now
whoops.
at your town clerk's office. Voting on March 4th. I believe these are all the usual places. First 3 towns open at 10 and Sheldon opens at 7, and then polls go through to 7 p.m. in all 4 towns.
Any questions or comments?
The piece of property you want, what's the plans you want to do with that?
Piece of property that we want.
It's in our town report that we need to give you a piece of property.
We're trying to clarify where the lines are. So you're not giving us anything, we're just kind of cleaning up the deed work, and I can defer to my more intelligent municipal.
So
neighbor.
so that is in the warning, in the town warning this year in Sheldon. The sort of strange thing happened here with this parcel of land that we're sitting on, which is that in 1972, the land was given to the town of Sheldon, and then it was used by the school district to build this school here and operate as a school district. When the town and school district were more or less the same thing, I guess that didn't matter as much, but as we've been amalgamated into this larger district, it's kind of created some problems relating to who is responsible for what parts of the property. And so and as we've had some more difficulties here at the town, it's been traffic and parking has been an issue here in the school property for a long time. And as we've had more discussions with the town about, with the school about how to do that, it sort of became clear that it would be easier if one entity could just take care of this parcel instead of trying to do it together all the time. So, and it made more sense for the fact that this is a school, and it's, you know, we'll see what happens in the future here, but I think that Sheldon is in a relatively safer position as the school process goes on with the state's proposal, that this parcel is going to continue to be operated for the benefit of the school, and probably be wiser for the school district to be in charge of maintaining it. The town will retain, in the proposal, the town will retain the assets that it has here at the school that are more important for the town to be maintaining, and then the school would take over the initiative to take care of the things that make more sense for it to be taken care of. I don't think the school has any plans for the property other than what they're currently doing, and as I said, maybe some improvements to the parking and traffic situation, and the town's willing to cooperate with that.
And we're certainly keeping an eye on the trend lines in Sheldon in terms of population. We know we've got 2 modular buildings or double modular building right now to educate kids in, and so I think if there's going to be building growth anywhere, it's probably likely to be here next. It's certainly statewide an uncertain time to be trying to go to voters for a bond payment for any expansion of schools until we know who's going to be running it.
But we would convey it to you at this point, but then you would convey it to the next district, right?
I would assume so. If the process is similar to how it was in Act 46, that will all have to go through legislation. And so, you know, we can make assumptions on conveying the land and conveying the debt that we have on this building and on the other buildings. But the legislature really gets to set the rules on that. And so that's what we'll be watching for tomorrow and as the process goes along.
The only thing we've had to respond to so far in the governor's proposal is, I think it was about 18 pages that outlined what his proposal are. There have been other briefs that have come out since then, but the details, none of those details have been there for us to really look at. So we're both looking forward to that tomorrow. Any other?
Just on the governor's proposal, there's a particular part of that I'd be interested to know what your thoughts on that are important to this district, I think, which is the issue of school choice and particularly high school choice. I think basically the 4 towns are in this district because we wanted to preserve that at the time. And my understanding is that should this happen where there's 5 school districts in the state, we would enter some sort of a lottery system where there would be a proposal. My understanding of the proposal is that each student would be assigned a high school that they are supposed to go to, and then the issue of school choice will be relegated to a lottery system where there would be, each district would have at least one choice school that would be some sort of magnet school, and then so if you wanted your student to go to a different high school than the one that the state is assigning them, you're really just taking a chance on a lottery to draft them into that school. If that's my understanding, but anyway, I just wanted to, if you could extrapolate on that.
Sure, and I'm on a group that's kind of digging into the proposal. So I'll again say, we haven't seen the legislation yet, but what, based on how the Agency of Education is answering our questions on it, my understanding is that you have this new district, that boundary line is pretty solid. Kids are not going to be going beyond that boundary line. So they're not going to be going to Stansted anymore. They're not going to be going to Alberta Ski School or overseas. Within that district, the board has a lot of control in terms of designating school choice schools is what they're calling them. I think they are required, or it's envisioned that they're required to name one. They can name as many as they want. There will be a process for private schools that they have to go through at the AOE to make sure they're legitimate and transparent and meeting quality standards. It's the charter school bit's a little unclear. We've been asking a lot of questions on that. So I said, could we identify all our public schools as school choice schools and just let everyone choose? And they said, well, we need to get back to you on that. It's unclear whether, let's say the district wants BFA to be a school choice school. It's unclear whether they get to both be a school choice school and get to say all the kids who live in St. Albans City are going to go to BFA. They haven't really answered that question yet, so that's up in the air. It's also not really been answered whether you could say, in a town like Berkshire, historically they send some kids to Richford and some kids to Enosburg. It's unclear whether we could still allow that and say your attendance area is going to cover these 2 schools, or maybe Franklin can choose from MVU and Enosburg and do more than a one-to-one relationship. They haven't really answered us on that yet. What I think I know is that we would not be able to send kids to St. Johnsbury Academy anymore because that's outside of the borderlines. But a town like Enosburg could start sending their kids to Rice if that was one of the approved schools, and that's a choice that those kids have not always had.
So that's the part in the governor's proposal, but I will say that that part of this is being debated in a lot of different committees where other people have very different ideas about what choice should look like for students. I think that the overall sentiment is they recognize that during Act 46, choice was a big deal. We would have been a district. We would have been all 6 towns together if it wasn't. So they're trying to be really thoughtful about it so that they still have some options for kids to make some of those choices without opening it up so broadly that you then have, another 100 private schools in the state, which then your footprint of schools that you're trying to fund is going to make it even harder to keep our public schools open.
And then they're talking about changing those requirements and also changing a little bit the way money is moving. So right now, when a kid goes to St. J, we're writing a check for $24,000 a year. That would likely, they're saying that would be truncated, and it would be really the same amount of money going to any high school, whether it's Rice or whether it's public school or not.
Thank you.
And if we go to that 5 districts, could Chittenden County outvote the rest of us?
Yes.
Be the same thing it is now, as far as 4, because theoretically 1 could outvote the 3.
Yeah, in theory, they would divide any of these new districts up into kind of wards, like in a city. And so I don't know the population off the top of my head, but I would guess if that's the district, you're going to have one person from Addison County, one person from Franklin Grand Isle, and then 3 from Chittenden, or something like that. Because it would be based on population, but, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's been a lot of feedback based on conversations I've had locally on that. We should need to have equal representation in a way that makes sense for everybody. That's being outpowered by Chittenden County. It's a statewide issue now, in everyday life, so I think that's something we absolutely need to push back on and come together as people to do that. It's very concerning.
I will tell you, it would not shock me if we ended up with something that was closer to county. So that might look like we don't have to worry about whose borders are where, and we have to figure out how to navigate these new rules with all of the schools that exist, which that feels like a big change, but a much more manageable change than maybe 35,000. So, but we don't know. These are predictions. Any other questions?
Yes. When you were talking about not having choice of the 4 high schools here, but I don't really know how to word it. In the past, if you had a special ed kid or somebody who was just an exceptional student and what they needed isn't provided here, can that still be sending those kids out of our area? You know, like
You mean at the elementary level?
or high school? I would think it would be more in the high school.
Like a specialized, like ALM students, like just school like that.
So we definitely can do that now with, well, even within these 4 schools, we have an elementary school choice policy, so kids can apply to attend in a different school. But we do have some students who have more intensive needs that require something more than what we can offer within the general ed setting. But Michelle is here, she's our special ed director. We have built our own in-house alternative programs, so we are sending fewer students outside of our communities. We're meeting their needs here within our communities, within our alternative programs. I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
I'll get you.
Yeah, in terms of the governor's proposal, I haven't seen anything specifically talk about that yet.
Well, special ed is not in the ratios at all, so I'm very curious. But I don't know what.
I've heard rumors that there's gonna be one intensive needs school for each district.
But we don't even know anything
But
about like
that's-
funding, or because when they give us ratios of how many interventionists per, 450 student elementary, 600-ish student high school, how many of each kind of teacher in special education is not in that at all. So tomorrow I'm going to be listening very clearly for what are they doing with special ed.
I think it's not just special ed. I think those real extraordinary, the ones that are coupled with medical and mobility, not just you need intervention. I think it's you need medical care, you need support to ambulate, you need a van, you need a ramp. I think those types of cases, there's a lot in Vermont. I think there's a lot of concern, at least from agencies and families who support those with developmental and intellectual disabilities, what is going to happen to those kids, and that's
Yes.
really concerning.
Hopefully we'll have more answers tomorrow.
I'll watch.
If this budget does get voted down, what is the next steps? And like based on your pie chart, what would be most negatively impacted, at this point, do you think, if it is turned down?
Well, can you go back to the pie chart, Courtney? Let me start by saying I sure hope it doesn't get voted down. I hope that it's approved, because when you look at this pie chart, all of these factors, these are things, if we were to make a cut here, it would be reducing more staffing. We cannot touch this part unless students move away. We can't touch this part because those are the other health benefits. And then this is a super small portion of your budget, and some of it we aren't going to be able to touch either. Special ed, transportation, food service, those things. So the board would have to go back to the drawing board and say, I suspect they'll look at all of the positions where we are with principals right now is we're digging into how many students, how many teachers. We're starting to get closer to that precision staffing. So I'd suspect that's where we would go next and figure out, you know, through attrition, if teacher, I hope, not trying to speak for the board, but I hope we could have a conversation through attrition and say, are there some of these positions that we could maybe not fill? And are there some of these positions in Terry Sue's school that maybe they only need 4 days a week, and can we take 1 day of that person? We're doing more and more of that and shifting them across. Other than that, it'll be up to the board to have that conversation. We'll certainly make recommendations, but we have not gone into this with that prepared. We're trying to be hopeful that this budget will pass. And I would like to think that, one, thank you for coming. This is a really good turnout for our budget presentation, and I hope that if people hear this part of it, they'll understand, you know, what it represents, the change in cost from last year to this year. For the NMV district, can you go to that slide where it's the projected tax rate? So for one more. In Bakersfield, your proposed tax increase is 0.0017. In Berkshire, that is up 10 cents, and again, that's the property value piece. In Montgomery, that's up 16.5 cents, and here in Sheldon, you're up 0.0067, so really flat in Bakersfield and in Sheldon. So I hope that people see that as a positive, and I hope people in Berkshire and Montgomery will understand that the reason theirs is more is because their properties are now valued more and they have to be taxed on the value, not what their appraisal grid list says.
Just to add on, I think awareness, understanding, all of those things that you just said on a community level. This turnout here is amazing tonight, but in the, I think, 8 years I've been on the board, I think this is the most people we've ever had. So I think there are so many people that will look at we're paying 10 million and last year was 8. I don't want to pay 2 million more. That's not what it is. It's not a dollar for dollar equation. So I really hope that for those of you that feel comfortable speaking about it, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, have them call Morgan or Lynn or your board members and ask questions to understand how these budgets are built, what we can control and what we can't, because at the end of the day, to Lynn's point, there's nothing to cut other than positions and resources for our children and our schools. And at the bottom of the barrel in terms of our spending in the state of Vermont, that's very, very concerning. So education is key, and have folks reach out if they need more support to educate their friends, family, and community members.
I'm going to add on to that because in Vermont we have what's called the Brigham decision, and that within that decision we're supposed to be able to provide substantially equal opportunities for all Vermont students. It shouldn't matter where they live. That was what was built into, well, that was a decision based on the funding formula changes that happened during Act 60 and 68. So when we look at this visual, and we are down here, and our partners in Enosburg, Richford are down there, this system is not serving our students well. So we are not providing a substantially equal educational opportunity as some of the other much higher spending. And I'm not suggesting we should be spending that much per pupil, but we also shouldn't be at the bottom. We were able to do some of the things that other schools have been able to do for a long time. We were able to do that because of these grants. So it is for that reason, some of the shifts in how we fund education could be positive for our communities, and I hope people will keep in mind, I mean, no one wants to open their tax bill and see an increase. I think they're very respectful increases. This board is really thoughtful, as is the Enosburg-Richford board, but further reductions will drop us even lower in our comparisons, and I don't think that's good for our students. We're doing a lot for our students, and we're finding ways to do more than what we can do with the local budget that you're voting on.
Since we're on this slide, and I'm just looking for a little bit of context here, and we don't have a small school here, I would say. What what aren't we offering by being down there instead of at least in the top half of something like this graph? Or maybe, I don't know if Terry Sue feels like she can answer that, or at the elementary, especially at the elementary level.
Yeah.
Yeah, foreign language, when we
That was the
merged
first-
years ago. That
So
was-
I think there are staffing level differences. I was working with a colleague recently and we were talking about their school size, my school size. I was thinking about Sheldon in general, and talking about the number of interventionists they have. So we have, in Vermont, we have the multi-tiered system of supports. That's what kids get from their classroom teacher. And if they need a little extra time and support, what they get from interventionists. And if they're still struggling, what they get from our special educators. And then if they really are still struggling, maybe some of those alternative, more intensive services. So it's the continuum of what we offer students. And what we're able to offer, I will tell you, speech and language is one thing. We have, is it 1.4, Michelle? Or 2.4? 1.4 in-person speech and language pathologist plus 1 online, 2 online.
1.8.
Okay, so not a lot.
That's not a
That's
lot.
for the whole supervisory
That's for
union,
2000.
NMV and ER. And we are struggling to hire more than that. We would have more if we could hire them. So there are other systems in the state that they have SLPs. They have enough SLPs where they're able to assign an SLP and have that person work between 2 preschool classrooms. So the discrepancy between what they're able to input into their MTSS system and what we are staffing level wise is very different. So that's one example.
If we had all the grants that have been chased, if that money was reflected in here, would it make a significant difference of where we are? And maybe you don't, it's okay if that's not math you've done.
I don't know that. I would guess it might move us up a little bit because things like Title I are driven by poverty.
Mhm.
So the wealthier districts wouldn't see as much Title I money.
But all of it isn't also in the classroom on a regular basis. Like we have the big one for after-school enrichment, not
Right.
during school. So it depends what you're talking about specifically. If you're talking about, will it change what happens between the hours of 8 and 4 or 8 and 3?
I think she was asking about that cost comparison between the.
Just sort of, I mean,
per-rated
that's
people.
that's part of what's being spent, whether
Yeah.
or not it comes from, tax or in the
Right.
budget.
Right.
So I'm just sort of curious if as a district or an SU, if that was part and parcel of it. Like when we look at what we aren't spending on our students versus what we are, I was just curious, gosh, if we're chasing so many grants that we need to hire people to go research grants and write those for the stuff that the SU and the boards kind of consider kind of basic stuff that we need. There's a bit of a disjoin there. And so I'm just trying to get an idea of what aren't we doing, and is it merely due to the community can't afford it, doesn't feel that they can afford to vote on a budget that's larger because that's just what we've got? Or, what else is at play? And even with the weighting, with the changes in weighting last year, this graph has not changed much.
We actually dropped some, especially in ER after the third round of budget defeats.
I think a lot of the grants that are sought after are structurally related. A significant amount, I know of what Vern has done is Beaver boiler related, new windows, we need paving, it's a lot of that type of
Infrastructure,
things and
yeah.
not directly correlated to the kids. And I think Heather Moore, our after school director, writes grants for our LEAPS program and all of the things that they do. So that's outside of your typical curriculum day cost per pupil. It's those extras. And I think one thing that sticks out to me in terms of what we're also not getting the way these higher tiered schools are is enrichment for kids who might need that extra. Right now, we are asking teachers who are already spent to say, can you differentiate for our kids? We need a higher level of reading, and now that teacher has to do it or figure out a way. Well, there are other districts that do have those supports, those positions to say, you need a higher reading level, you need extra math, let me help you here. We don't have that in our district. That's another thing I think that we're lacking.
I think that has changed in the last 5-6 years.
The other thing that I will say that is really impacted, I want to say two things. One is what we're able to offer for salary here. If you compare with other parts of the state, we're competing with, somebody said it earlier, Chittenden County. So they're able, when they have open positions, they have candidates that apply for those positions, and we often don't. So we're often having people that are coming into education as a career change, and we're having to invest money. I have several positions out of my office that work primarily with helping to train people to be teachers while they're teaching our students. They have not had a pre-service education experience, so that's different than what some other parts of the state have. And I think that, I'm losing my second point, I think it had to do with Brigham. Oh, in terms of why haven't we added more in, the way the funding system is now is every community gets to decide what level of education that they'll support, and some communities have a much broader tax base, and they're able to much more easily pass their budgets within their communities. So they're able to build things in that will be supported, and that's how it gets determined now, is will your community support the budget or not? And when you have communities like ours, we serve students. When we talked about poverty, our communities are pretty high in terms of poverty levels. So when we build things into the budget, there is an impact on your tax rate, and there's an impact on how much of that spending will people actually support at the polls. So when we go back to that Brigham, the substantially equal doesn't work with this current funding system, because communities like ours can choose not to provide substantially equal because, for whatever reason, that they can't afford it.
Why, if someone votes on a budget, there could be any number of reasons
Right.
that they take exception. It may or may not be the bottom line. We don't know.
Right.
We don't have a way to know, right?
Right. Any other?
Back on the grant money, on whatever the one was, the lights or whatever, you said we were approved for it. Do we have the money in hand, or is it?
It's all done. These are all new lights.
Right, but you said there were some other ones coming for the boiler or whatever.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
boiler project in Berkshire, we don't have the money in hand, but we have the grant approval for the big grant we've gotten. We won't get money from Efficiency Vermont until the project's up and running. So that's something that we have to front.
And that is if they get money to fund it,
Sure.
we will get money, but if they don't get it, we won't get it.
Right, their funding stream, I think, is maybe one of the safer in this environment, because they're getting the money that's coming off all of our light bills. You know, that's how they get the bulk of their funding.
They'll get more in a little while.
Any final questions?
The health insurance, what plan do we have?
The only one we can have.
Is
Because
it like
it's,
the gold, silver, platinum?
oh, you can take that.
Yeah, so there's silver, gold, 2 golds, and a platinum that teachers can choose. Here, everybody chooses either the silver or the gold, and I think that's statewide. But as Lynn was starting to mention, or mentioned earlier, that's negotiated by the state now. I think we have a plan in place for maybe the next 2 years before it's renegotiated. And that is an area where, in terms of critiquing the governor's plan and critiquing legislation that's come up in the past, we've certainly been saying it's double-digit increases every year. This is the piece that you need to get a hold of. And there are unpopular things that the legislature could do to curb those costs, but they haven't done them yet.
Do we know what the price of the family plan is compared to the single plan?
Yeah, we've got all that. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can certainly get it to you. And it's on the VHI website, which is the VHI.org is the nonprofit that runs it.
That's up here for me. I need it like here.
Gotcha. Well, we'll print that page off for you.
Any final questions?
Thank you. That was an awesome presentation. No question. Just appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We have, I think, plenty of pizza if you want to take some for the road.